Hi, this is Congressman Joe Courtney. I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Back home in Connecticut, I am hearing constantly from people who are very concerned that Social Security and Medicare could be damaged during this battle over extending the debt ceiling. Again, this is a program which six figures, over 100,000 people in the state of Connecticut, 2nd District, depend on Social Security benefits. And I consider it my sacred duty to protect and strengthen that program, not use it as a cash cow to pay for a policy about not extending the debt ceiling and protecting the full faith and credit of our country. I spoke earlier today about this issue. Watch it here. Madam Speaker, on January 13th, the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, announced that the United States had hit its debt ceiling, which is a legal authorization that Congress has done on a recurring basis since the early 1900s, that, again, allows our Treasury to go out and sell bonds so that we can pay the bills for our country, whether it's fentanyl issues or whether it's our military, whether it's our education programs. Normally, when a Secretary of the Treasury gives that type of an announcement, responsible leadership in Congress takes up the task of extending the debt ceiling so that, again, our government can continue to function. We are talking about paying the bills for existing budgets that have already been passed. That's what the debt ceiling is directed and empowers by Congress moving forward. Well, it's been 18 days since Mrs. Yellen's warning to the country and to the world, and the leadership of the House has done absolutely nothing. We have passed a series of pointless resolutions that have no legal impact in terms of real lives of people in this country, and a bunch of bills that we know are immediately dead on arrival in the Senate. So again, as the clock ticks, the world wants to know, what's the Speaker's position? What does he want in terms of doing what, again, every Speaker, Republican and Democrat, have done over and over again to protect the full faith and credit of our currency and the paper that the Treasury sells, again, as basically the gold sterling in terms of financial markets across the world? Well, Mr. McCarthy has not told us. So what's at work here? Well, if we look at the Republican study group, which consists of roughly about 170 members, they've been talking openly and publicly about the fact that they want to do entitlement reform, which is to go after Social Security and Medicare. Well, I would just say, Madam Speaker, that this is a very off-target proposal and solution because, in fact, Social Security has no bearing in terms of the operating deficit of the federal government, which, again, the Speaker claims that he cares so much about. Social Security is funded through a separate revenue stream, the payroll tax that comes out of working people's paychecks every single pay period that goes into a fund that, again, is separate and distinct from the operating budget of the federal government. So, again, the proposals of the Republican study group, which is to raise the retirement age from 67 to 70, to impose a degraded level of CPI, cost of living adjustment, change CPI, would hit middle-class Americans hard, particularly younger ones, because this is definitely proposed as a sort of a two-tiered Social Security system. But there's a fundamental flaw in the whole approach that's being suggested and discussed by the Republican Study Conference, which is the claim that the Medicare and Social Security systems are entitlements. Entitlement is not a legal term. It's not a budget term. It's a political term. It's an attempt to try and mask the fact that Social Security, since Franklin Roosevelt signed it into law 80 years ago, is a social insurance program. And if you don't believe me, then look at your paycheck, because what your paycheck shows is that the withholding for Social Security is separate from your federal taxes, which goes into the operating budget of this country, and is designated as the Federal Insurance Contribution Act, FICA, for old age insurance. Again, it is an insurance program, and it provides coverage for people who are retired because they've hit retirement age, for young people who've lost a parent, or for people on disability. And again, if we were responsible about trying to deal with the fact that Social Security is going to be challenged in 2033, it's going to have a shortfall. It's not going to go bankrupt, which the press sometimes says. There's a solution to that. which is to lift the earnings cap, which today basically anyone who earns income above $160,000 suddenly doesn't have to pay into the Social Security system. So as Warren Buffett, a billionaire, aptly pointed out, he's paying less into Social Security than his secretary. It's called the Buffett rule. And a solution which basically says everybody pays the same rate, or at least people whose income is above $400,000, would overnight push back the solvency for decades to ensure that people, young people in particular, are going to have a Social Security just like all the Americans in the preceding 80 years have had. That is really one of the pillars of middle-class economic security. So in the meantime, the clock is ticking. We know that we are really not going to just go at the debt ceiling, but are actually going to hit full default by June 1st. This leadership has to do the right thing, just like we have done in past presidents and past Congresses. Extend the debt ceiling.
Time has expired.
I yield back.